you've taken the time to join us to talk about research integrity at Stellenbosch University. We are joined by Professor Leslie Swartz, who's a professor in clinical psychology and within the Department of Psychology. He is also one of our research integrity officers, and he will speak to us about research integrity, the procedures, and some interesting principles and values and standards that you need to keep in mind to ensure responsible research conduct. Thank you, Leslie, for your time and always for being willing to speak to us and share with us your knowledge and experience. I think you may begin. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, please let me know if you can't hear me, or if the slides don't move, or whatever. I'm not planning to talk for too long because I hope we'll have some discussion. I just want to say that I kind of wear many hats in the university. As Clarissa's mentioned, my home department, I'm lucky enough to be in the Department of Psychology, where I've been for quite a long time. And one of the jobs that I do in the university that I value the most, in fact, is being one of the research integrity officers. And this has to do with my long history at the university. I've been at the university 23, 24 years now, of depending very heavily on the entire research integrity process at the university to support me in my research, and more generally on the division of research development. And Clarissa and Solani and all of their colleagues have supported me as a researcher in the most astonishing way, actually. I think we're very lucky to be at Stellenbosch University. I wasn't quite sure what to, how to pitch this, given that this is one of a number of talks in a series. And what I've decided to do is something of a kind of mishmash. So the first part of my talk, which will lean very heavily on the work of Dr. Nicola Barsdorf, who many of you will know, and who has been a great support to me throughout my association of working with her when she was with our university. I'm going to just give some general background around research integrity, and then the second half I'm going to talk more personally about some of my experiences of being a research integrity officer, what I think I've learned through the process, and why I think the process is important. As always, I think that one of the advantages of working in our university is that we pride ourselves on being a thinking institution. And a thinking institution is an institution which has the capacity to learn, to change its mind, to develop, and to think in new ways about things. And that's really the approach that I take. So I'm not trying to sort of tell you things on high. And just on a personal note, one of the things that I've noticed and value very much in terms of the research integrity process at Stellenbosch University is how, along with the evolving interest in the university, for example, in the rights of people with disabilities, which is an area that my own personal research is on, how the institution has been able to evolve and to think about these things in a more and more sophisticated and I think appropriate way. I think we've got a lot to be proud of. As I say, many of these slides are from presentations from Nicola. I cannot pretend to be Nicola, and I will be putting my own twist on things. So, there we go. So, if we start with the concept of health research ethics, which is where a lot of the birth of the contemporary research ethics movement started with, it's really started in huge difficulties and abuses. So Tangwa says, I think quite correctly, that health research ethics is a discipline that can be said to have been engendered in scandals and atrocities. And it's an attempt to redress such abuses that health research ethics establish itself as a field of concern. And it's always useful to start, I think, with health research ethics. And I'll, in the next slide, to talk a little bit more about that. But I do want to say that because of the history of where a lot of our focus in universities, where it's come from, and it is often from the health field. My own experience, as I'm a psychologist, so I'm registered as a health professional, but I'm a social scientist. I'm not a medical doctor. Some of my experience is that incorrectly, I believe, a number of social scientists, including psychologists, are actually less quick than people within the health field to think as carefully as we should about research integrity ethics. For some years, I was seconded from the university to the Human Sciences Research Council, where I served on the ethics review board there at the HSRC, and there was a kind of an atmosphere then of, we're not the bad guys, we're not the medical guys who do terrible things to people, we're good people, we'll police ourselves, we don't need this huge infrastructure of research ethics. And I think that that's a mistake. I think it's absolutely the case that we can, on occasion, have too many rules and be too petty. And I think that does happen in some institutions. But I think the principle that every single person should have to think about their own positioning in relation to their research and to the kind of work that they're doing is a very important one. So historically, and I'm not going to go through this in a lot of detail. This is something that Nicola was using for a particular presentation, but certainly where I learned about the birth of research ethics starts in the Tuskegee syphilis study, where people against their knowledge were infected with syphilis. Very early on, even if you look at a number of these other studies, going on to the San Antonio Conception study in the early 70s, and what happened in Nazi Germany and the Nuremberg trials and so on. There is this intertwining in the field of ethics with a lot of the issues that we consider very important today, which are questions of racial justice, gender justice, justice on the basis of sexual orientation, disability justice, and so on. An area which I'm particularly interested in at the moment is digital justice, and how we ensure that our research, if we're using digital platforms, is accessible and helpful to the maximum number of people. But you can see the kind of fault lines of society mirroring the history of ethics internationally and certainly in South Africa. So the objective of research is to develop generalizable knowledge and to improve people's lives. And this is obviously a good aim, but research has the potential to inflict harms and to treat participants as just a means to an end. So our aim should always be to treat participants with dignity and respect while they contribute to the social good. And having ethical principles may help us find the least harmful route. And I think it's important to talk about the least harmful route rather than the route that causes absolutely no harm, because I think we have to take responsibility, however well-intentioned we are, for the potential of all of our work to end in harm. So we need to work responsibly within our context. We need to protect participants from harm and promote their welfare. We need to promote good science, and science and ethics are inseparable. I know that this is one of the issues which our entire research ethics infrastructure has to think about a lot. If research is not scientifically valid and cannot methodologically reach the aims that it seeks to reach, it can't properly be ethical. But we also need to promote good science indirectly, and treating people respectfully is likely to lead to better research. People will be more likely to actively engage, to answer truthfully, to provide us with critical and honest feedback, even if we don't always want to hear it, and to return for follow-up data. So it's a way of improving the quality of our data. So active adherence to the ethical principles and professional standards, essential for the responsible conduct of research, which we use the term RCR, is central to responsible research. And this requires honesty, responsibility, trustworthiness, fairness, accountability, and high regard for the scientific record. And these are actually quite demanding and lofty aims of us. And it's not something that one can just declare that one has. So what is research misconduct? Research misconduct generally falls into three categories: fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism in proposing, performing, or reviewing research, or in reporting research results. So, in brief, and I imagine this audience is familiar with this, fabrication is making up data or results and recording or reporting them if they are real. And for those of you who doubt whether these things happen or how commonly they happen, I advise you to subscribe to something that I read avidly every single day, which is Retraction Watch. If you just put the term Retraction Watch in your in your browser, you will come to it. I get alerts every day from Retraction Watch, and it's astonishing the amount of fabrication that we find. The falsification is where people manipulate research materials, processes, or equipment, change or omit data or results without scientific justification. And this is a very good little image here, because this is about really cooking the books. There's an amazing amount of falsification, and of course plagiarism, which is an anxiety which we have constantly in the university, and which is increased around AI. There is going to be a particular session on AI. I'm not going to talk about it in detail, but obviously it's a particular concern. But all of these, if you read Retraction Watch, you'll see examples of these every day. And there's a spectrum of research conduct, so which goes from responsible conduct of research, which is active adherence to ethical principles and professional standards, and research misconduct, which involves falsification, fabrication, plagiarism, and so on. And there's a range. So there may be questionable research practices in between. And of course, depending on how we see the world, and this is something that the entire research infrastructure has to think about in all universities, but I'm speaking specifically in our own. The idea of what is fair, what is questionable, what is for the social good, what is not for the social good, is going to change within a broader political and social context. There's been some attempts to quantify questionable research practices, and though research conduct is thought to be rare, there have been a number of reviews, these are just some of them, which put questionable research practices somewhere, quite high, between a third and about half of research studies. So what do we do at Stellenbosch University? And I'm going to talk very briefly about the infrastructure, and then I'm going to talk more about the particular role of the Research and Integrity Officer and what we do. So we have this huge infrastructure at Stellenbosch University. And here are just some figures which were presented by Nicola at the end of last year at our joint meeting. We have a number of committees. I'm not going to go into any detail with any of these slides, but you have a biological and environmental safety research ethics committee, which is a very active committee. We have the animal care and use research ethics committee. We have the social, behavioral and education research ethics committee, which I think sees the most of all at this stage, and then the health research ethics committee, and there are two HRECs. And in summary, this is an enormous undertaking. There were 3,197 reviews in progress in 2023, 476 consultations, 43 seminars, workshops, and trainings given by the various committees. And then it looks small, but an increasing number of investigations of potential non-compliance. And this is where the role of the Research Integrity Officer comes in. So if we have a look at the overview of the Research Integrity Officer and how it's developed in 2023, there's been quite a lot of developments in the university since certainly since I got involved. The first time I was ever involved in a case was not as a Research Integrity Officer, but as a member of a committee which was appointed by the Research Integrity Officer to investigate a particular case of misconduct. So until quite recently, there was one permanently appointed Research Integrity Officer who handled all the complaints and developed research policy and served as Secretariat to the Senate Research Ethics Committee. And then from 2022, what was decided was to separate those roles, partly because of this increase that we were seeing, and where there are now contracted in Research Integrity Officers who have other jobs, and it is the job of the Research Integrity Officers to work together with the Secretariat on an ad hoc and case-by-case basis. I happen to be one of those Research Integrity Officers, and we were appointed by the DVC in charge of research. That kindly would be Professor Moyo, for a period of service, investigations as we needed, and now complaints are now allocated to one of the alternate Research Integrity Officers. So at the end of last year, we were busy with our 8th investigation in 2023. There were 9 altogether last year. And it's a dramatic increase relative to previous years. So previously there would be 1 or 2 on average. And given the amount of work this takes, it seems small, and it's very small in relation to this huge research infrastructure on which all of this is built. But there's quite a big load, because there is a need for a great deal of thoroughness in the processes. And I've decided not to go in a lot of detail into the processes. I'm happy to answer questions about that, but really just to give you an overview of how these work. So there is currently the Research Integrity Officers do quite a lot of work in addition to our day jobs, and what is also required is considerable administrative support. We need people to take minutes. There are lots of meetings, there are investigations, there's a huge number of documents to manage. I'm very inexpert on working in MS Teams environments, so I've had to learn a whole lot of things about that. So there's a lot of infrastructure involved in each of these cases, and we find the sister universities like UCT, they're also finding this increase and the need for increased infrastructure. So this is something which is likely to increase. I'm not 100% sure why. I'd be happy to have a kind of discussion about why there is this increase, and to consider this, in fact, in relation to another job that I have, which is not strictly inside the university, but as a journal editor, where we are finding, as journal editors, we are getting much more comeback, requests for retractions, complaints about our processes, and so on. So something is kind of happening, and I'll be interested to know what other people think. There's something in the water. One of the crucial issues in dealing with a formal complaint, and I'll show you how the formal complaints work, is that is the question of time. So within 7 days, we have to acknowledge that we have received a complaint, and to notify the people who are the object of the complaint, person or people, or it could be a group who are the respondents of the complaint. And anybody has the right to raise a complaint. I mean, this is after there will have been a long kind of history, but I'll talk about that in a minute. Then there'll be 14 days to complete a preliminary investigation, to inform the respondents of the specific allegations and to invite them to an interview. Then within 2 months to decide whether the investigation will need a formal investigating committee who operates independently of the research integrity officer. Do we need to go into this in more detail? Do we need a committee of experts to look at this particular case? And that committee of experts will then generally have about 2 months to conduct an investigation, and then to report to the research integrity officer what their recommendations are, and then the research integrity officer then reports to the DVC, to Professor Moyo in this particular case, and then within 7 days of that, Professor Moyo informs both the complainant and the respondent of the investigation outcome. And one of the issues I'm going to come back to is one of the requirements in the whole process is that the issue of the outcome is not just for this particular case. So part of what we're concerned with in all research integrity cases, even though there are relatively few of them, they're really flashpoints in the way that the university functions, and they will often reveal features of our system that we hadn't quite thought about, and so on. So what we're required to do is to make recommendations, not just about how do we resolve this particular issue with this particular complainant and this particular respondent, but what does this mean for our research integrity processes in the university as a whole, for our ethics committees? Do we need more training on something? How can the university learn from this? And this is quite crucial, because it's important for the university to use this very intensive, labor-intensive and time-intensive work to do more than just deal with complaints, but actually to help us learn as an organization. So in 2023, as you'll see, a number of us dealt with some complaints. Some of us dealt with more than one, and you can see some of them are relatively short. So if I think about myself, and these are the ones that are obviously precious in my mind from last year, I received a complaint right towards the end of December 2022, and it took a long time. It took until the end of May 2023, partly because there was a break, but not just because of that. It was quite complicated. And then there was another one which was referred to me in June. It was done by the end of August. And these are the current research integrity officers of the university, and we're actually quite dependent on one another. So although there are not formal links amongst us, I certainly consult with other research integrity officers to get their advice and help. And similarly, I have done this in a reciprocal way for them, and I'm very grateful for what I've learned from my fellow research integrity officers. But I want to talk more personally about this process. So the whole process, by the time something gets to a research integrity officer, it's been through ethics processes, it's been thought about. So it's really only the issues which have not been resolved through the usual REC mechanisms that we get a referral, and it is in its nature, it is a process which is under very strict governance context in terms of policy. So I've put the link there. This is a 29-page document which is called Stellenbosch University's Procedure for the Investigation of Allegations of Breach of Research Norms and Standards. It's a formal document. It's anybody can read it. Anybody can look at it, and it's actually quite an interesting document to look at. And the thing that really struck me when I first had to engage with this as a member of one of those FRCs, those committees, so even before I became a research integrity officer, was how much detail it went into. Every little step of the way was detailed. I didn't really understand that until I had experience of being in the process, which I'll be talking about a little bit as we go on. Excuse me, sorry. A sip of water here. Right. So, and this, I've just given you one example. There are lots and lots of documents. Again, this again is freely available on the web. For a complaint to reach the research integrity officer, there is a specific format that has to be followed with quite a lot of detail, and you can immediately see that the process looks quite, in a way, legalistic, which really becomes one of the strengths and the weaknesses. It's not a weakness, but the strength and the challenges of the process. So if we go back to the 29-page document that I mentioned, here is an example of this is some of the text in the latest version of the document. The respondent has a right to due and fair process, must be allowed to ask questions, present information evidence in his or her defense, seek advice and support from anyone of his or her choosing, question or raise points. In accordance with Section 35 of the Constitution, a right to legal representation during all stages of the investigation, starting when they're informed. They may appoint and instruct a legal representative to represent them. Their representative may be present at all meetings which the respondent is obliged to attend. They may speak on behalf of the respondent at such meetings, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, this is very similar to I mean, this is clearly framed very legalistically, which is obviously important because we have to protect the process, but it also raises, I think, challenges for the process. There's no alternative to this. I'm not saying it's a bad idea, quite the contrary. I think it's an excellent idea, but it does raise challenges. And I want to talk about some of the for me, some key issues that need to be managed in the whole process of these investigations. So firstly, by the time a complaint gets to a research integrity officer, there's usually a lot of things have happened. Time has passed. So what might have happened is somebody submitted something to firstly to a desk in their department, and that's then gone to the particular research ethics committee, the appropriate one. They've waited and waited. There's been they wanted to get on with their research. If the person's anything like me, they tend to not like to wait for deadlines, and when they get a research idea, they want to get going. And so time has elapsed. They may have a grant, and they may be needing to spend the grant in a particular time, all sorts of things. So passage of time is a huge kind of issue. Nothing would reach the research integrity officer if there weren't some kind of history of conflict. So there's some kind of difference of opinion, or different understanding of the rules. So there's been some kind of conflict. It's quite likely, it's not always the case, that the respondent might have got very frustrated with the rec, and would probably have discussed it with people, with their head of department, with other colleagues. So there's been lots of outside parties kind of getting to hear bits and pieces about this. This is completely, as it happens in any kind of institution, and it's sometimes what can happen is that some of the outside parties who may believe that they have an interest in the case may be scrutinizing quite carefully what is happening, and are transmitting their views to the research integrity officer or the research ethics committee, so that there are lots of uncomfortableness often may have happened, and it may have taken quite a bit of time by the time it even reaches the desk of a research integrity officer. And given the importance of the legal context, and I've shown you some of the sort of legalese and the importance of the protection of legal rights, the respondent may feel that this process is here to punish me, and that the job of the research integrity officer is not to look independently and fairly at things, but actually to act as an enforcer for processes that the respondent disagrees with, feels are not legitimate, and so on. And certainly in my experience, both being on a committee appointed by a research integrity officer and having been integrity officer myself, I think it's almost inevitable that there are going to be these kinds of feelings. The alternative to that also is also kind of problematic. I've certainly been told in a number of processes, well, your job is just to rubber stamp everything. It's just another hoop that everybody's going through. You're not going to do a proper investigation. You're never going to go against the weight of opinion, which has already been expressed. So neither of those puts the research integrity officer in either an independent light, which is what the research integrity officer is supposed to be, or in a very positive or collegial light. And I think it's absolutely inevitable, and I do not blame respondents for this. I don't think it's correct that I don't think this is a correct perception, but I think it's almost inevitable that many respondents will feel that they are victims, and they will often feel that they are victims because they've been inserted into what is in its very nature a large and complex and legalistic system. It has to be. There have to be rules which take account of a range of possibilities, and which have to be expressed in the most general terms, so that these rules can accommodate a whole range of particularities, which is not the interest of the the respondent, but is absolutely important, central to, paradoxically, the realization of their rights and also to the rights of the institution. So I think that all people who are involved in investigations of this kind, it's almost like research ethics processes writ large, because there are tightropes and balancing acts, but these seem to me, from my own experience, to be often, slightly higher wire tightrope acts than in the general run of the mill. I think one of the features that absolutely, for me, stands out about the research integrity environment in general in our university is its emphasis on academic collegiality and developing understanding. But there's always a need to balance that with the importance of keeping very strictly to procedures, which cannot really be questioned and are standard. And we can poo-poo procedures, but procedures are what you need when something goes wrong. And when something goes wrong, what people need to be able to trust in are the procedures. So they may have all sorts of questions about individuals' motivations and why people are doing things, and why I, Leslie Swartz, for example, chooses to be a research integrity officer. What am I getting out of it? And of course, I do get things out of it. But the procedures are there to create a safe frame that is fair to everybody. But that really can be experienced as not dealing as colleagues and just being nice people who have to work together in the same institution. What commonly happens with a research integrity officer is you'll get sent a large amount of information from what has happened before, through through whoever the complainant is, and through the relevant rec, and so on. And obviously one has to build on that. But each research integrity officer has to we have to make up our own minds, and we have to give all parties to put their case. And people are often very tired. They say, I've told the story 100 times. I've been back to the rec. I've spoken to them. Can't they just tell you what I've said to them already? Why do I have to put my case again? But it's really important. And in fact, in my experience, through that process of retelling and retelling within a different kind of process, often new nuances kind of emerge. So it's really important to be thorough and fair and complete. But the person who's making the complaint feels uncomfortable often. The respondent often feels very uncomfortable. The issue of time is a huge issue for respondents in particular, and it's not surprising if something's been going on a long time and it finally reaches a Rio, that feeling of I've put my life on hold for this. I can't carry on with my research. This is having all sorts of knock-on effects. But it's important not to shortchange the process because of this time pressure, and also I have to say because of other demands on the Rio's own time and energy, because we do this in addition to the other work that we do. I have experienced both as a committee member myself on an investigation committee and as a Rio, that I have pre-existing and ongoing relationships with people that I'm investigating. These are our colleagues. We work in a similar institution. It makes sense if I'm doing an investigation that, given the range of Rios that we have, that I would be asked to do an investigation in an area in which I can have some understanding and some expertise. I think of one that I did in particular, where I think quite a crucial feature was that there were questions raised about methods, and I understood the methods. But given that I understand the methods, I tend to know the people who use a particular kind of a method. So there are these the relationships are not clean. You're not completely separate from people. There may be, on occasion, I've experienced this in a number of cases, pressure from external parties. People are very concerned for the welfare of the respondents. People are very concerned for the welfare of the complainant. May try and influence the process with the very best intentions in the world, usually, and being collegial, but it can still be a difficult kind of pressure to deal with. Generally speaking, it's not a hugely difficult issue to deal with, but I have experienced, and I'm not the only one, some direct or implicit threats of reputational damage to myself or to the institutions. I have been told, contacted by external parties, that if you do such and such, and people will think such and such of you, not from people who are directly involved in the investigation, responded to or complained, but from outside people. This is something which I think is understandable, and people often do it, I think, with the best intentions in the world. But it does amount to a threat and an attempt to influence what the research integrity officer does. And clearly this is an issue writ large, which, I mean, this can happen to people who are on our regular RECs as well. There's often quite a lot of anger from various people in various ways, and it's absolutely understandable that if somebody is in an interview with a research integrity officer, that they're going to be angry with the person in front of them, and of course it's really important not to retaliate. One of the most tricky issues is this question of confidentiality and being off the record, and what I found quite helpful for myself in this process is being quite clear that I cannot unhear things. So people, and I make this very clear in what the rules are in terms of how I work during a process. So if I hear something from somebody and then they tell me, well, this is off the record, or don't tell anybody, or I don't want anybody to know, and this mustn't come into your report, and so on, I can't unhear that. And it's very important that people who enter any kind of investigation, either as a complainant or as a respondent, understand this. What I found helpful is I have experience doing work as an expert witness for the courts in my role as a clinical psychologist. And generally speaking, people have the idea when you come to a psychologist for psychotherapy or an assessment or whatever it is, that you will excuse me, that you will come to see them under conditions of confidentiality. So what I have to tell people before they say anything to me, if I'm doing this kind of work, is that kind of confidentiality does not apply, because I do not have the ability. Some people think that they may be able to do this. I do not have the ability to unhear things and to forget things that I've heard. I don't believe it's possible to do that. And another kind of tricky feature is that because people are very distressed when they come to us, and this is generally speaking, both parties may experience a certain level of distress. what they will often want from us is, and this is really understandable, reassurance. You know, am I wrong to be making this complaint? Am I a bad person because now here I'm a respondent? What do you think? And it's very hard sometimes, particularly when people are distressed, not to want to reassure them and say, no, you're doing the right thing, or of course I can see that you're a good person, and so on. When in fact, what is really important to the process is not to foreclose in the direction of supporting either party. So you know, there's a funny kind of line where I believe that in some ways a research integrity officer has to be equally distant, if you like, and equally disappointing in some ways through the process to each of the parties. That this doesn't mean not being kind, not understanding and empathizing with whatever distress there is, but I cannot solve the person's distress in the moment, and one of the easiest ways would be to reassure people, say, no, it's all going to be all right, when I don't know yet whether it's going to be all right, or to say I agree with you when there's no point in doing an investigation if I've already decided that I've agreed with someone. So to maintain some kind of neutrality in the face of distress. So I've spoken, and I'd be interested to hear your ideas about that. But finally, I just want to think about why I think this process works in our university, and I think that what is absolutely key is the fact that we have a very explicit infrastructure and set of rules to which everybody can refer when needed. So everybody has access to the rules. You have access to the rules, even though I hope that relatively few of you are currently involved in cases. It's really important that they're there. And I mean, as I think I said at the beginning, you can forget about the rules when everything is working fine. The minute things go wrong, you need procedures and rules. And there's definitely a parallel here with my role as a journal editor. I've you know, when things are going swimmingly, which is most of the time, I very seldom refer to all our lists of procedures. But when I need them, you know, it's important that they're there. One of the things that makes the process so meaningful to me is the amazing support. So we have rules, but people who are working on this ethics issues every single day, who are better qualified than I am, who have more experience, who understand the university better than I do, are always there to support me. I've had amazing support, and I'm sure it's often been very tempting for people who've supported me to say, this is what I think you should do. My experience has been I have never had, either as a RIO or as a member of a formal investigation committee, I've never had any interference from the Division of Research Development. So, I mean, I think that's really important. And I think it's important that all of these things are considered within an overall research ethics culture, which is designed to support researchers and research. This is, you know, we are not the police. We are here to make research as good as possible and to make researchers do their best possible work. My experience of most complainants and respondents is that they're cooperative and helpful and understand the need for procedural tightness. It's something that has to be spoken about explicitly with them, but they generally understand it. And I think I mentioned earlier that in every single case, we look at lessons from this particular, what is this particular case going to teach the particular department that the people are in, the particular faculty that people are in, the university as a whole. So there are learning opportunities, not just for those who are directly involved in cases, and can be a window into broader issues from which the institution can learn. And certainly I know that we've had a number of interventions which have been hosted by the Division of Research Development, which have come out of particular investigations, and one in particular was incredibly helpful for me, just as an academic in the university, to learn from something which had raised its head as a particular problem, which was very difficult in its particularity, but has really helped me think about things much more generally in terms of the university. You'll excuse me, I'm working from home and my granddaughter was just saying goodbye to me, but we are getting to the much less formal part of today's proceedings. I feel incredibly lucky to be doing this. I would like to encourage people to get involved in the research ethics infrastructure of the university. I have learned a huge amount and continue to learn, and I'm really well aware of the privilege that this work gives me. I'm sorry, I've gone slightly over the 45 minutes which I granted myself, but I'll be happy to take questions and have some discussion. Thank you, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Leslie. Your presentation was so insightful, especially just giving us insight into what happens during these research misconduct investigations. I think sometimes it can seem like the black box where an allegation is made, and often there isn't much communication in between or to the outside of the investigation team, other than what happens at the end. But also, I really enjoyed your reflection on the tensions that the research integrity officers experience, I mean, having to investigate their peers. And I think we do, it's good to hear that and to think about that a bit more seriously. We don't have any questions in the chat, but I wanted to give everyone the opportunity. If you have a question that you would like to ask live in person, you are welcome to raise your hand. You can choose whether to switch your camera on or keep it off. It's entirely up to what feels comfortable to you. I'll just give a few seconds.
Managed to stun everybody into silence.
Your presentation was just so good. I think everyone's just in deep thought. If I may, Leslie, if I may use my moderator privilege.
Of course.
And maybe this is a question that I would like to pose to our audience members as well. I think it's something that affects us all, but in your opinion, because you mentioned that there is, and I mean, being part of the Research Integrity and Ethics Office, we do see sometimes this increase and hopefully soon a decline in research integrity cases. What do you think? What are your thoughts on what could be driving this? And I wondered, I'm opening up this question to you and our audience members. So if you want to put something in the chat, maybe your thoughts, please do.
Yeah. I'll give it a go. I'm sure it's nice to see a number of the names I recognize on my screen, and there are people here who could answer this much better than I can. You know, what I think is really important is, firstly, not to particularize this. So it's important that UCT, for example, which just happens to be, we have historical links with them in terms of research integrity. There are kind of partners up the road. This is not, it's not just us. And I have to say that as a journal editor, and I edit the South African Journal of Science, and I'm also the editor of the Scandinavian Journal of Disability Research. So, you know, the Scandinavian Journal is not it's not a South African journal. It's and having been a journal editor on various journals for about 30 years, I mean, couple of things, trends over time. Number one, it's I don't have evidence for this, but I don't have numbers for it, but I have evidence in my bones for it. It's harder and harder to get reviewers, regardless. I mean, across the board. So we're taking longer and longer to get to people, and I mean, I think it's a more general issue around what is the nature of academic service, and how is it counted or not counted, and I mean, I know it's a struggle within the university itself, but in addition to that, I do not remember having complaints 20 years ago, and I am currently dealing with, in the different journals that I work on, I'm dealing with simultaneously with three different sets of complaints. I can't obviously go into detail, but where quite serious things are being said about me, the reviewers, the journals, how terrible we are, and so on and so forth. So something, I mean, in some ways it's wonderful, because I think it's good that people can sort of speak their minds. But I think there is also a much more litigious atmosphere than there used to be. And as I say, in some ways it's good, because I would, if I think back 20 years or whatever, I wouldn't have dared to say the kind of things to editors-in-chief that are said to me as an editor-in-chief. I just, I would have been terrified, and maybe it's a good thing that people feel that they can speak kind of openly and so on. So I think there's also, I think that's one kind of issue, and I think that we are in more generally, and I'm certainly not the first person to talk about it. I'm not any sociologist. So please forgive me, sociologists. but cultures of grievance are quite prominent in general in the way that we interact. So people feeling unfairness, and some of this again, I think, relates to things that are so with every positive move, there may be kind of consequences, because I think it's really, really important that we have, and this is due to worked out at Stellenbosch and certainly at UCT with people like Lynn Horn and her team with the Cape Town statement on research integrity, the scope of what we consider are potential harms and wrongs done to people has increased, and so it should, because we know that 20 years ago, we were aware of it, but worries about racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, disablism, and so on, they just weren't spoken about. It's just sort of accepted that this is how the world works. Discrimination against people in the global south as opposed to people in the global north, which is really what the Cape Town statement was, why that's incredibly important in broadening our understanding. So we've got this broader understanding. So there are going to be more kind of complaints. I haven't looked empirically at the nature of the complaints that have not, so I haven't looked at the other, partly there is confidentiality, what's gone to the other research integrity officers, or where I haven't been on a formal investigation committee myself, but with every single one of the complaints that I've been involved in, there's been something about the changing culture in which research happens, and who is considered to, what is considered an important issue has changed and broadened. And I don't think we're quite clear yet about all of these issues. So they're very kind of contested. What is a harm? What constitutes a harm done to a group on the basis of race or gender or whatever? Really difficult to think about when we're sort of thinking about interviews, but I'm blabbering on here, and you've got me on a point
all
of
day, Leslie.
yeah, no, well, I mean, as you can hear, I mean, listen, I mean, if you aren't all going to talk, I'm going to have therapy here with Clarissa, because I'm dealing with all of these complaints on the journals that I edit, so I'm getting this all out. But I think those are some of the kind of contextual factors. And I do think, you know, another thing that's happened certainly at Stellenbosch is that we've grown tremendously as a research institution, and we've grown in complexity, and actually the nature of the institution has changed. And for me, it's been largely positive. When I came to Stellenbosch, you know, 20 years ago, I kind of entered, you know, when I first became a head of department, for example, chair of my department, there were all sorts of rules which were not written down in the university, and I had no access to. And there was this kind of boys' club. I mean, I'll never forget. I mean, this is, you know, I'll tell you a joke because I'm desperate that nobody's talking here. But I got an email from somebody saying, everybody knows that if my name is put in an email in the CC line as opposed to in the to line, that I mustn't answer that email because it's not really meant for me and I'm just being copied in. I didn't know that. I still don't know it, by the way. But that was a piece of sort of, you know, everybody knows. Well, I mean, maybe everybody that they had to do with at Stellenbosch University at the time knew it, but it was a very closed institution. And so also as the institution opens and complexifies, and we get people with very different understandings of what an institution should be, and that's good. I mean, I'm delighted that it's gone in this direction, but I think it makes space for conflicts, which, you know, we've all been here forever, and we know this. So sorry, I'm being very unfair to the past of our institution, but I think people understand what I'm talking about. And in fact, this is something. Another of the hats that I wear is, he said desperately trying to talk, is I'm the academic convener of the Early Career Academic Development Program, and I know it's a major issue for people entering the institution as outsiders, whereas, you know, years ago, the people who became staff members at Stellenbosch had studied here or at similar university. So all of these things make for conflict. Yeah. But that's also how we learn.
Yes. And it's important. I'm thinking back to what you said, how you started your presentation in terms of that we are a thinking institution.
Exactly.
And I think if we consider that in terms of what we do and how we treat others, if we can keep thinking and just embracing, but not be uncomfortable with the increasing complexity.
Exactly.
That could be to our advantage. I'm not sure if I see a couple of people have left. And some of I see Suraya also said that she had to leave. If there aren't any other questions, if no one raises their hands in the next few seconds, then I think, Leslie, can you just give it a few seconds?
Sorry.
No one? I think then we can close off the session. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your insights and giving us things to think about, giving us some perspective to consider as we engage with our colleagues and our students. Thank you so much, Leslie.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I hope it's been helpful. Thank you.